I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
What is this?
Just listen.
Bilbo Baggins. I sent this to you this morning. Bilbo.
Welcome, ladies and
What
gentlemen.
is it?
Okay, this is Leonard Nimoy. Demetri, you explained.
You know, there is no explanation for this. I have no. It's Leonard Nimoy with his Spock hair, and he's singing a song, the Ballad of Bilbo Baggins. I found this little gem during the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I watch it every now and then because it just makes me laugh. It's great.
Here's why it's relevant. Besides the fact that he sings about Bilbo Baggins.
Doing the Hobbit.
It's this movie, right? We're here talking about the Hobbit, Desolation of Smaug. I want to make sure I got Smaug correct.
Smaug.
There's so much mythos around this whole thing, you know, Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and Tolkien just in general. And so
New Zealand.
Exactly. There's been so many references to it and so many other pieces of art. So today we hope to add to that conversation. By no means can we could spend 40 years and not be the definitive.
There is an author with a 2-volume analysis and research on just The Hobbit alone. Just The Hobbit's 300 pages. He has 2 volumes of research.
Yeah, that person works for Warner Brothers.
And I am your host, Phil Svitek, joined alongside, yet again, Demetri Panos.
Hello, everybody.
And Sara Stretton.
Hello.
And we have today in the booth Stephen Lemieux, who's read the books. He's a fan, so he might chime in every now and then as well. And
he's been heard around the Anatomy of a Movie Hall singing Bilbo Baggins. The Ballad of Bilbo Baggins.
There we go. That would be Stephen's credentials.
Yeah, YouTube, Leonard Nimoy, Bilbo Baggins. It's the first thing that comes up.
All right, let's get into this because we've got so much to cover. And again, even in 4 years, it still would not be enough. I want to start with kind of a Lord of the Rings recap because of, it was such a success, and it's really what allowed this movie to happen. Would you guys agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sure.
And for you guys, what is it about the Lord of the Rings movies that were such a success, and then transitioning to this, what made you excited about?
So you're assuming that we're Lord of the Rings fans? Is this what you're assuming?
Yes. I can tell by the smile on your face.
I don't know, but I don't know if Demetri's a Lord of the Rings fan.
I'm going to assume yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I followed it through. Did you read the books?
Sure. I read the books when I was a kid, and then I reread them when the movies were coming out. So, yeah.
See, I pre-interviewed everybody.
But our audience does not know that, Phil. I don't know. Did you read the books?
I did.
Are you a fan?
Every winter, I try to read The Lord of the Rings, and I just watch the movies instead and see the behind the scenes at this point.
Okay.
I mean, well, I'll jump in. I mean, regarding Lord of the Rings, there had been various adaptations. Back, she tried an animated such, and
I saw a play of The Hobbit when I was little.
Were you in that play?
I'm not even kidding. No, I was not in that one, but I saw it.
And that inspired you?
It did.
Oh,
it
good.
Stuck with me.
Hobbitses?
I still remember it. So,
well, I still remember
my introduction into the Lord of the Rings.
Well, I still remember Lord of the Rings, and you have this. Each of the books in that trilogy are very dense, jam-packed, and it's always, how are you going to make this? How is this going to be fully realized on screen? Will it? And Peter Jackson just succeeded in every level. The wow factor and the world that he realized was pretty much, I can't speak for everybody else, but right out of my imagination, when you see Hobbiton and you see little Bilbo Baggins' house and how it was portrayed in the books, right from page to screen, it was pretty much exactly how it would be. And the movies had this epic scale of adventure. And I remember her saying, because I think one of the Star Wars movies had come out, whether it was episode 1 or 2. I think it was episode 1. And I was like, yeah, George Lucas should be taking a page from Peter Jackson on knowing how to make a great fantasy adventure kind of a story, because it was just all on screen, and it had given me something that I had never seen before. And I was like, wow, I couldn't wait for these movies to come out in succession. So yeah, I was hooked by the movies instantly.
Yeah, I would say so. I read all the books, and then but what really threw me into this world was the movies, and I loved it. And I lived in New Zealand for a little bit and made a point to go see a lot of the places that they use and the scenery, because I was really just captivated by the scale that the films had and the beauty in them. But I would say I'm a pretty big fan. I'm not a crazy big fan, but I'm a big fan.
You're a fan.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, this movie, this one specifically, worked really well for me. I enjoyed it. And I was a big fan. Early on, right, when there was the whole controversy of the 3 movies versus 1 movie, and how are they going to do that. I remember Ian McKellen coming out and saying, like, it's Peter Jackson. Like, he wouldn't just do it just to do it. You know what I mean? What I like is that, obviously with the Lord of the Rings and now this, he's always shown respect towards the material. And, we've talked about this on other episodes. When there's a passion behind the movie versus like, oh, you know what, let's just make this because it's going to be a cash cow, there's a difference. Yeah,
and I think it's also very important to note that Peter Jackson wasn't involved. He wasn't going to direct this movie. They passed the reins to Guillermo del Toro. And he was supposed to be, he was supposed to be head honcho on The Hobbit, and it was supposed to be 2 movies. They even had the breaking point where that was going to be, and one thing led to another, and they kept on getting delayed and delayed. Guillermo del Toro had storyboarded everything out for his vision, and it was going to be his vision, and they delayed it so many times that Guillermo just said, hey, he had a hand in the writing and everything, and he just said, hey, I can't wait around anymore. It was I'm ready to go, and I can't do it. And, he had to, regretfully to him, bow out. But I think that's good for us. It would have been interesting to see a Guillermo vision, but I think it would have been different. Well, it was going to be different, actually. That's why they hired him than Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. And that could have been weird. It's, if you're already used to one way that the world looked, so Peter Jackson stepped in.
I think people wanted it to still be in that same vein. I do not.
Yeah,
I
it
was
just
so
would have been
in love with the vision of it. This was like an expansion on that. I didn't want a separate entity. I want the same world.
Yeah, I mean, it just would have been interesting. And Guillermo went on to direct Pacific Rim. That's a movie that is near and dear to my heart. It was my introduction to this fabulous panel doing Pacific Rims. And Peter Jackson went off to do the Lord of the Rings, and they changed everything that Guillermo had set up, with the exception, it's just very interesting. He still gets a credit. He's credited for writing, and I think some of that is due out of respect. He was with the project for such a long time. He lent his vision and what he wanted to do. He's somewhat credited for creating Torial. But Peter Jackson and his crew came in, and from page 1, they rewrote it to their vision again. And, that's either a good thing or a bad thing. For me, it was a lot of it. It was like, okay, I've already been to this world. And, when they changed it from 2 to 3 movies, I was like, okay.
Oh, originally I was horrified by that. Originally, I was so mad that they had put this into 3 films. I literally was just jumping on board that this is just turning into a money thing, and where's the passion going? With this movie, they really turned my opinion around on that, because I think that they did a really good job with Desolation of Smaug, and I think the choices they made and the changes in character development and in plot really escalated the level of this movie. It brought up the tension, and it allowed there to be more footage, more film, more storytelling. And with almost every decision they made, I'm on board with.
Yeah. See, I disagree.
Okay.
I still think, I mean, there was a lot of padding in this movie. The first movie, you could have just called it padding. And this one, I like this one much better. Like, we didn't talk about our opinion. Like, you were saying that you thought this was a fun movie, and I agree. This was a much better, and I think to a point paced, better than the first movie. But for me, there was still times, Lake Town, or what's it called?
Lake Town.
Yeah, Lake Town. Stuff that was going on in Lake Town. I had no idea what the hell was happening. And they had these other characters, and there was this politics thing going on. And I swear I was waiting for Popeye to show up because it looked like Robert Altman's Popeye set that they just repurposed. And I don't know. There were other factions of the movie that just slowed down. But the action was ramped up a ton. We got the Peter Jackson action that we're used to in these movies.
Well, that's the interesting, with Guillermo del Toro, the ones that obviously he loves Pacific Rim, but even that, ironically, is slow paced, and it's more about emotion and things like that versus, action. I mean, Peter Jackson, I don't think the camera stops once.
Yeah.
It's just wherever you go, it's always moving. It could be a close up on you, Demetri, and it's still gonna push it no matter what. Yep. Whereas with Guillermo, I think he Pan's Labyrinth comes to mind. Yep. There's that examination of moments.
Right.
And I think it would have been a completely different style.
Completely different. And I would have welcomed it, I guess. I mean, we'll never know, sadly, I think, but it would have been good to see, because it's still going to fall under the Peter Jackson banner. So it's much like Christopher Nolan and having a hand in Man of Steel, where he's not going to let it go out of, he's not going to let the DC universe down, so to speak. And I think with Peter Jackson overlooking everything, I still think we would have had some of that flair, but it would have been nice to see what Guillermo could have done.
Was Guillermo working with Fran and Philippa?
Yeah, I believe he was, he had written stuff and he was getting it passed through Jackson. And for example, with Toriel, when he brought that up, one of the main reasons they brought her in was, Guillermo del Toro felt that it's too much of a meat market. There are too many men. He goes, it would be great to have an independent, strong woman. And then it became, okay, so how do we make her? What do we give her for an origin? And then she became an elf. And they really enjoyed that aspect of doing it, so of creating Toriel for this movie when he had it as two movies. So,
do you approve that decision?
Yeah, I don't disapprove of the decision. It's, to me, it comes to a point of right now it's almost like padding. They're throwing in a supposed love triangle, and they're doing stuff with. I mean, she's a great character. Evangeline Lilly, I thought, was awesome as the character. She was great action. Whenever she and Legolas were together, I was like, "Oh, this movie is kicking ass right now." They were awesome together. But I'm not against it. It just
I really think that maybe it's because I am a girl and I already thought in the original Lord of the Rings, I was like, there is so few women. If they hadn't brought any women into this trilogy, I think it would have really kind of been lacking, especially for me as a viewer.
But you were on board as a reader in Lord of the Rings. You're on board with that. You really like the movies a lot. True. And you read all the books.
Well,
so,
as I'm identifying, I do want a female character to identify with. It makes me just attach myself more. So with her, I like her as a character. I like the personality of the character. I don't really care for the love triangle. It's a little pushed for me. Maybe that's because I also have the knowledge that she didn't want it as an actress. So I'm already kind of rubbed the wrong way on that. I think her action sequences are great. I think that she does bring a little bit, she's feisty, but she brings kind of an awkwardness as well. I'm specifically talking about where she's healing Killy, and we get kind of that flashback to, where they're shrouded in light as they're speaking. And everyone in the theater I was in was cracking up. Like, it wasn't a moving thing. Everyone was just laughing because it was like it was just slightly awkward in the middle of all this battle and darkness for her to be like, I don't know, magic or something. And we were all just cracking up.
I get it, but do you also get the sense too, though? I mean, I don't know what else you do with it, but I sort of get the sense that the character has to die because
Totally.
I mean, the character's not in the Lord of the
Sorry to
Rings.
spoil anything.
No, but I'm not spoiling it. I'm just thinking aloud.
Oh,
Well, here-
that
I'm totally on board with you.
I
100%.
think that the character's
going to
have to die.
I don't think she has to die in that sense, only because, ironic. Peter said this, like, she's the first elf we've seen that's not of royalty.
Right.
And so it could be that she just.
What does she go on walkabout? I mean,
I think
it's
she's
one of
gonna
a
die.
couple of things. Like she either disappears and goes to. I mean, she doesn't end up with
Legolas.
Keely, and she doesn't end up with Legolas. So
She's going to die. I'm
That's the only
pretty
problem I
certain
have
yes.
with this trilogy, unfortunately, is that it's building up such a massive world that then to know that, okay, then what happens in Lord of the Rings? Lord of the Rings almost seems lessened by what is going on here. Because they're raising the stakes so high.
yeah.
I'm not sure if I agree with that. I think that for me, a lot of things they've added are really similar to things that are in Lord of the Rings, particularly like how much the orcs are involved currently. And how much they're involved, like the constant chase that's going on. Like that to me was very much pulling me back to thinking about the original trilogy. And that it's adding a little bit too many parallels for me. I wish that, I like that the eye is kind of just coming in and that they're like giving you glimmers of it. I think it came in a little bit too early. But that's I guess that's one of my only problems is with the adding that I'm seeing too many parallel circumstances to the Lord of the Rings. I mean, we've got like 3 people who are kind of heirs to thrones that aren't accepting their thrones, and I'm like, I've seen this storyline like 5 times and I know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it seems more of it's The Hobbit, was to be some semblance of a prequel, but it was written rather much more simply than, like, if you read The Hobbit and then you start reading Fellowship of the Rings, it's almost like the styles are much different. And there wasn't as much, if you read The Hobbit, there wasn't as much of a prequel sense, so to speak. This movie to me seems to be exactly set up as a prequel to the Lord of the Rings movies.
Yeah.
I mean, they're putting so much things in The Hobbit that weren't in The Hobbit. Sauron wasn't in The Hobbit and such. And so they're doing a lot of things, which is fine if that's the way you want to set it up. It almost seems like they're doing a George Lucas. Like, instead of going beyond, they're giving us, they've changed The Hobbit now so that it fits within the cinematic world. And they're adding more things, more so than the book world, obviously.
Well, a lot of the stuff also, though, they are pulling from still Tolkien's world, maybe not specifically from The Hobbit, but from other works and other tales and appendixes and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, and I'm not a kind of, I do read a lot. I read a lot. I don't, when, I'm reading, when you read Game of Thrones, they have like appendices in the back and everything. And sometimes I'll thumb through those so I can get like a family history, because there's so many names that he'll drop into those. With The Hobbit and stuff, there was so many appendices. I didn't read it. I was like, 300 books, I'm done, on to my next book. And
No, I
get from
I
a
don't think anyone could blame you. I think it's something that sometimes they do. I think that it helps cinematically in the cinematic scope. And I think it also provides what they call like Easter eggs for very big fans who are like, oh, I know that. And like they did put a lot of little references in this film, and I think that people are really liking that.
Well, what's interesting, if let's say Lord of the Rings is World War II, this is almost like World War One. Peter, in talking about the script, they said they wanted to do more of a commentary on politics. So right now is when all the alliances are shuffling. So that way, when you, to add to your point, Demetri, when you rewatch The Lord of the Rings, you know how the alliances came to be.
Right.
And, I mean, there's Lake Town. I mean, it's all about politics.
Yeah,
Of
which
course.
wasn't like it. But again, I was like, is this necessary? Because to me, that sort of kind of, I don't know. To me, it was so much filler that I didn't care about the politics. And it got so entwined in their politics that I was like, what the hell are they going against Bard for? Like, I never understood what made Bard such a bad guy to begin with. And in the books, he's not like, his character is pivotal, but yet not really so fleshed out. And I don't know.
His character's more abrupt in
Yeah.
the book. I like that they're giving him more, and I also like the actor and the job he's doing, so I do like him. With the politics, again, it's drawing me too much into, oh my gosh, what am I thinking of? What's his name? Gray hair kills the son, father of Boromir.
Oedipus?
Corrupt
Yeah,
politician who, like, eats fruit disgustingly. Oh my gosh, I'm totally
Yeah.
blanking on names
Wait,
right now.
the Lord of the Rings one?
Yes.
talking about the king?
No, the steward.
Oh,
I totally
Boromir.
forgot his name.
From Rohan?
Rohan?
No.
No. Too
No.
many people.
Never
Yeah.
mind. Anyway.
It'll come to me.
Denethor.
Thank
Dennis.
you. Anyway.
Thank you. Good
So-
save.
That was.
But to me, they're very parallel, where you've got these two people in rule who aren't really the true heirs of the line of kings, and they're kind of corrupt,
Sure.
and all this stuff's going on. I'm like, okay, so you're going to have to step down at some point. I did like that they made the little shift where he's the one who welcomed the dwarves and was like, embraced them for like the wealth that they might give his city. But it was a little much.
You could tell that it was somewhat fabricated. I mean, I think, like I said, I enjoy this movie more than the first movie. Some of my problems with this movie were investment in characters, number one. The first trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Peter Jackson did a fantastic job of getting the audience, the movie-going audience who would have never read the books, acquainted with our adventurers, from Frodo to Sam to Merry and Pippin to Gimli and Legolas, and like you knew all of these characters so well that when they were in peril, you actually cared about the characters. You know, when The Hobbit, the first movie came out, you know, all these dwarves show up at Gandalf's house. They start throwing dishes around. They're doing this. I had no idea who the hell is who. And in this movie, I thought, you know, I got, you know, I found out Kiwi or Keely and the gray-haired guy, Bo. The
older gentleman?
The older gentleman.
The older dwarf.
You know, him. I mean, he was fine, but all these other dwarves, if
Hello,
anybody were
the
to...
redheaded dwarf. I love the redheaded dwarf.
What's his name?
I
Like,
don't know
any
his
of these
name,
people...
but he's hilarious.
Here's why I think it, you know, they did a nice, in terms of that, they did a nice job. You have to have them because they're in the books.
Sure.
But I think they focused on Thorin and they focused on the love triangle aspect of it. And then the rest just provide comedy. I mean, they were just so ridiculous.
Fun. I think they're so fun.
Yeah, but to me, I'm not invested in nearly as many of them as I was in... If one of these dwarves were to die, I'd be like, who was he? Like, well, what did he mean to me? Like, you know, and I think, too, that the other problem that I'm sort of having with this series is that in The Lord of the Rings... both book and movies, you got a sense like you were seeing the movie through Frodo's eyes. And even though at some points they were fragmented or they were apart from each other, it was Frodo's eyes. This movie's called The Hobbit, and there's very little hobbits in the movie. There's very little of Bilbo Baggins, and the book is all through his perspective. And it's about his incredible journey there and back again. And this one, I find that they're having a hard time. Like, I don't know whose perspective I'm watching. Is it Thorin? Is it...
I didn't mind it only because so much of Lord of the Rings was spent on that and him trying to be the man that he was
Talking
supposed
about
to be. Frodo.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, grow a pair, my man. Just stop.
And then you end up loving Sam, and then like...
Yes.
I
With this movie, what I loved was, you know, they spent just enough time for me when Gandalf says, you know, what did you find? I found my courage. And it obviously was a lie, but then it was also the truth. And we kind of see that throughout, and then we end on him, obviously, dealing with the dragon, and he's changed, and ultimately, I think it's going to come down to him kind of, something amazing, doing something, right? And he's been lessoned by Thorin at the end, like, oh, he's just a common thief.
I mean, this is what I'll say. I like the adjustments they made specifically with Thorin. I think that making him a little bit darker, giving him some layers, some history, that I like. I will completely agree with Demetri, and this isn't focused on The Hobbit. I'm not sure how I really feel about that. Because I really liked the movie, I don't know how they would have been able to adjust it enough. But what's funny to me is a lot of the moments that I take away or the thoughts I take about in the way aren't focused on Bilbo.
No,
they're
they're
focused
not.
on these like new characters. I'm like
Right.
I'm thinking about the scenes with Bard and his family. I'm thinking about Legolas and Evangeline
Tariel, yeah.
Tariel, and that's strange because the book is so focused on Gandalf and Bilbo, and that's not really where my mind's at. That being said, that may be also just because I was surprised by these new elements and not as used to them, so that's what's drawing my attention. But I like character build-up. I like character work. And I think that everyone's doing a really good job, and Bilbo is doing a great job in what he is given, I think.
And what he's given, I mean, that's. I mean, listen, I like Martin Freeman. He's great as Watson in Sherlock. He's great in the Cornetto trilogy. He's a good actor. He's doing as fine of a job as he can, but it seems that they're more interested in all the other surrounding characters other than our main character. I think he was even, to me, from what I recall, and please correct me if I'm wrong, he seemed to have been in the first Hobbit movie more so than in this one. Like in this
very
one,
much so.
Oh, yeah, I would definitely say so.
and he had some scenes. He had some key scenes, like the spider scene, which was a great scene. He saved the day in that, and then after that, he sort of
And him and Smaug.
him with Smaug.
And finding the
Smaug is the
But here's the
Smaug.
thing, for me, he comes into light when he needs to. He saved the dwarves from the elves. Key moment. And he's slowly pulling the strings and kind of showing that he is integral to this. And then him and Smaug, that was amazing.
He's constantly that turning point, whether it's that or waiting for the moonlight and not giving up. He's constantly the person who keeps this adventure in play. Like,
well, he sort of has to too, because Bilbo factors in the Lord of the Rings. I mean, it's his find that perpetuates a lot of the movement, the action in Lord of the Rings.
Do you think that the ring's already gaining too much power on him?
Well, that was one thing. He seemed to be wearing. That's a great question, because one thing I said is, geez, he's wearing that ring an awful lot. And from what I remember in Lord of the Rings, like, whoever is wearing that ring is summoning evil. Like, they find you really quickly, whoever puts that ring on.
But
maybe it's because the ring rates aren't really in play as much already. Like, he's still in necromancer form, but
that, and also, not everything is in place. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's like Voldemort and Harry Potter, right?
True,
right
at the
now we're
beginning,
week 4.
right.
I mean, I just felt that he was already getting super possessive over it and already showing that, like, you get that eye of, like, the evil. And, like, to me, I'm, like, thinking about this timeline-wise, or I'm like, you have the rest of this adventure to go on. And then, you've got, like, your 100th birthday or whatever to get to where you're not turning evil. Like,
Sure.
when do you get the separation?
Yeah.
Like, or when is it numbed out or something? I was a little put off by that. I didn't expect him to already have that kind of evil in the back of his mind.
He relied on it a lot in this movie, more so than I even remember him relying on it. I know he used it in the book. So again, somebody who's well more versed in the book, please make comments. But in this movie, he seemed to rely on that ring an awful lot, more so than I ever remembered.
Yeah, and I think that could have just been like a camera focus, how they brought it up.
Sure.
But it stuck out to me.
Let's move on to talking about the cast specifically. I want to start with Orlando because I think this is funny. He emailed Peter Jackson like, "Hey, if you ever need me, I'm in."
Of course.
And that's how it came to be. I mean, it literally started with that one email.
Yeah.
Good move. I mean, I applaud him, and I think that for moviegoers, especially people who weren't big fans of the book. I think they liked bringing characters in from the other ones and having that like kind of crossing, and being that it's an elf, you can do that. And I really do like elf action sequences, so I'm happy.
Yeah, I'm not unopposed. Again, to me, this is one that, you know, bringing Legolas into this is more of a reason why, to me, this feels more of a prequel to the Lord of the Rings cinematic movies than the books. I mean, it almost seems like this is a bridge.
Well, they made that.
More
Remember,
so.
they made
brought in Gimli too.
yeah with the photo,
Right.
You know, so they're they pick their moments to kind of highlight these things.
Yeah. So and you know, if you're a fan of the Lord of the Rings, you know the whole thing about the dwarves and the elves, and you know, Legolas and Gimli become like the best of friends,
become like kin.
family. Yeah. And so you sort of kind of, and now you're seeing Legolas's dislike of the elves and such, and you know, and that's fine. Again, with you know, I agree with you. Whenever Legolas and Tauriel were on screen, that was just some bad kick-ass stuff going on.
Barrel
Great.
scene.
Well, the barrel
Oh
scene
my
was one of the best I've
goodness.
seen.
It was wonderful.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. You know, we talk about, and we'll go back to Legolas, but since you mentioned the barrel scene, earlier when we talked about Thor, and we talked about like the last fight where they were, you know, trying to with a hammer,
and
with
it's,
a follower,
whizzing.
and we're like, wow, like I haven't seen that before. The barrel scene was something
Similar.
that I hadn't seen. I go, wow, that was very cleverly choreographed out.
Choreographed, funny.
It was great. Yeah.
Exhilarating. Really, really great.
It's a great action scene.
I want to go down the river in a barrel.
Yeah, it's
wonderful.
a great action scene of the year.
That indeed it is. Let's also talk about Benedict Cumberbatch. Smaug.
Smaug.
What a year that guy's having.
What I believe he phrased the dialect, or someone phrased his dialect as Smaug as aggressive British politeness, something along those lines. And his manner of speaking was very captivating, stuck from what I've heard and what I remember, very close to the book.
Yeah.
He did this without reference to Martin. He just, you know, it was basically like me reading off a page, like, if Bilbo was saying, "Hey, Smaug," and then like literally just no tone and no intonation, and he would, you know, work off of that.
I mean, it was impressive, and it was alluring, and I think he captured the essence of a dragon very well.
Yeah, he definitely wasn't Pete's dragon. You know, there aren't that many talking dragons that we know of, and you know, if you're thinking talking dragon, that could come off really cheesy, and this was not cheesy. This was, I mean, it seems to be a year like a year of dragons. You've got Game of Thrones, which deals with a lot of dragons. Now we're having dragons in this movie, and Smaug was, very formidable. I mean, like so much so, and it had to do with Cumberbatch's performance, his dialogue, and the way that he read it, and you know, I mean, that whole sequence when they're trying to pin him down. And when they douse him in the gold, and you're like going, they got him, and then when he flies back up again, you're like, well, that didn't work. What next? And that just makes for a very extremely formidable foe, as he was in the books. But this one, I think, again, when we talk about realization, you know, what Peter Jackson is great at is bringing these things, these book concepts, and then blowing them up for a big screen. And that's movie magic. It's great. It's how, it's fully realized.
And that scene in general, where you do get the dwarves trying everything their brains can think of, and being crafty and being smart, and you think that they outwit him multiple times, whether it be by using Smaug's fire to light the mines, or
the furnace,
or using the gold statue to lure him in. And then they just keep getting defeated, builds you up to the potential that they're going to need more support.
Right.
And you have that, and you have it because these are smart dwarves that were crafty, and it wasn't enough. And there's a certain point where you need power and people and whatnot. So I liked that. And it was a fun scene on top of that. And it was visually wonderful. So I was really happy.
What did you think of Benedict Cumberbatch?
I mean, those scenes were just electric.
Yeah.
They really were. And the fact that I mean, just how the scenes were put together. You had Martin, who was acting on a green screen.
Yep.
Then you had CGI of the treasure.
Yep.
And then the CGI of Smaug, and then Benedict's voice added to that.
Yeah.
Just the process of the filmmaking to make that happen, and so many things had to come together to make it work.
Right.
It was really incredible.
And it's such a feat for the actors and the people involved. Like, I know specifically with Sir Ian, for Gandalf, he's often had to shoot things alone because of the size difference. And he, as an actor, that was one of the reasons he actually almost, like, did you read about this? He almost dropped out. He didn't want to be part of it because it was just taking away from him as an actor, because he didn't want to be on a green screen alone. He wanted to be acting with people. That's what you want to do. And
an extra zero to that paycheck. Okay.
But I mean, it is tiring and crazy for these actors to be acting in the circumstances they are and to make everything feel real for us. And like, we're lucky we get to see it all.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah. And what was great about the Smaug scene, and to an extent, well, not to an extent like the barrel scene, one thing that Jackson has been able to do, and this is throughout even the Lord of the Rings, he's able to ratchet up. He keeps things going. So, we have Bilbo Baggins, the treasure. We have Smaug. Bilbo finds that little orb of light,
Arkenstone.
the Arkenstone, right? Or the Arken, or the acorn, or
I believe it's called Arkenstone. I could be wrong.
So, okay, so we have.
That's what it is.
But what's great about it is it gives the audience a visual tether. Mm-hmm. It looks different from anything else. And he's even told, once you find it, you'll know what it is. So once he finds it, we as an audience know what it is, and we see it roll down, and we'll see it like in various different, like, he's trying to grab onto it, but then something else happens that he's got to tend to. Whether it's running for his life or trying out Smaug, and it gets kicked to over here, and that, like, those kind of action sequences, when you ratchet up conflict in an action sequence to make it go forward, like, those are what makes things like that fun to me.
I agree it's fun. But now that we're talking about the Arkenstone, can we talk about the Arkenstone?
Sure.
First of all, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
But this is a change, obviously. Like, it wasn't... I was under the impression that the Arkenstone was just kind of a thing. It wasn't like the uniting force behind all the dwarves and wanted by, like, the elves and all this stuff. And to me, and I believe I read online, someone else had this parallel as well, they're making the Arkenstone pretty much the ring. Like, they're very similar.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, they added the element of, it makes him greedy. It's going to poison Thorin's heart. And I was like, what? I was like, how many things can you have that poison people's hearts and cause greed? Like,
but I think that's just politics.
on.
I think it just, I don't know. Obviously, there's a lot of things that can do that, but I think...
Is it a metaphor?
As a metaphor, yeah.
I mean, I thought the ring was
absolute
a metaphor.
power.
This doesn't...
But, like, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And, in terms of uniting the dwarves and being the dwarf king, and then, making all these promises to Lake Town and things like that,
I'm in full support of the Arkenstone being, like, this almost, like, idol thing that people want to follow. That I'm fine with. I just didn't want it to be, like, poisoning. I just wanted it to be a uniting force. I understand the backing for, like, we need to bring all these other people and dwarves and elves into the scenario. So I understand, like, why you need something and someone to unite them. Like, that I get. As a plot device, I get it. I'm just like, just make it just that. It doesn't also need to poison him.
Think of it like the Deathly Hallows. Collect all three and you got something amazing.
Okay, it was supposedly made by Starlight or whatever. Right. That is a good force. There should be no evil identified with it. The ring was made by the Lord of Evil, so therefore it can have an evil signature.
Fair enough.
But the Arkenstone should not.
Yeah, I mean, I just looked at the Arkenstone as, like, as a device. Like, they needed it. It was like a key that they needed, and, greed is such a heavy theme. And if you want to talk politics, I mean, Smaug is the epitome of greed and what he has, and he'll do anything to protect it. To me, the Arkenstone was just like that kind of a device where they needed it to get to the next thing, and it was very important and they set it up in the movie I forget the details if they said what the details like if what it could do to you, but I don't remember that at all.
They didn't really. It was more that you can just poison your heart. Also, shouldn't Smaug have been like, I don't know, more protective over where it was and it not just be laying under like some random level of gold?
Well, he could have lost it too. He's so
Maybe.
blind with greed. He
I think
doesn't
in the
know.
first one we saw it get like piled on top of or whatnot, but I was a little like, what?
Yeah. So, but the scenes with Smaug were great, and I actually thought that they were, even having read the books, I was like, oh, they're gonna get him. Oh, that's great. And then it's like, he flies off, and it was a great. It was a great ending to this chapter.
Cliffhanger was good ending.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Sure.
Always. Although I think there's certain things that are pretty obvious. Like, for instance, give me a vote. Who thinks Bilbo has the Arkenstone? I do.
Is that, why do you say that? Is he collecting Deathly Hallows?
Is he doing Horcruxes?
Because they need it to bring all the other people into the picture.
So you think he's that greedy?
I don't think he's greedy. I think
That would make him greedy.
Why?
Well, is he going to give it up willingly, or is he going to hoard it?
I don't really know. I think Gandalf might have to come into play. I'm not really sure, but I think
every time Gandalf says, "Let's meet,"
oh, forget it. You're in trouble. Somebody's in trouble.
He says they meet, and then they meet like approximately 3 scenes later. That's what
if
happens.
only 3 scenes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, he could have it within all that action. He could have grabbed it somehow, but everybody seemed like to be doing their things, and even Bilbo had his hand. He had a good hand in helping out the dwarves, and I think the everything was so quick paced. But if he were to have it, it wouldn't surprise me.
I think it's set up for he could have it, and because to me it rationalized like he wasn't gonna hand it over to a guy who's pointing a sword at his neck.
Yeah.
He's going to try and take a breather there.
Yeah.
But I do definitely think he has it. That's my prediction for the next movie.
I want to talk about the dwarves only because, in the sense of casting, I think what's interesting, obviously they cast them to kind of look a similar feel, but I also like that they picked them for their acting skills as well, and knowing that, I mean, every one of them has a bodysuit. Right. You know what I mean? So, like, it just goes to, you know what I mean? Because you could have cast people to fit each body type. Sure. Rather than, like, so I like that aspect of it. You're picking the best actors for the roles.
And they're funny.
They're funny. I still don't.
You don't need to know them,
with
though.
Each movie, you're kind of getting a little more. So maybe by the next movie, we'll know all of them. But you're right. If, for instance, I was like, is one going to die in this fight team with Smaug? Like, are we going to lose one? And I was like, well, which ones can we lose that I will recognize? And there's 4. Or 5. There's 5 that I know. The other ones, I have no idea.
Yeah, and that's what, and that goes back to my original statement is like, if any one of them, except for maybe the old guy, we got to know Keeley a little bit.
And Keeley's brother.
Okay, Keeley and Neely. Is that a Dealey?
No, that is not a daily. It's
Feely.
Yeah.
So, if any of them died along the way, and that's the other thing too. Nobody really, like in Lord of the Rings and then Fellowship of the Rings, there is true peril and characters die.
Mm-hmm. Or at least we think certain characters die.
Sure.
Gandalf.
Yeah, well, Gandalf is, but I also remember like when Boromir, when he buys it, like that was an emotional scene. And part of it was because I was invested and I knew Boromir, and that was such a great, he died in such a heroic fashion. In this, like I said, in this one, and we know that death is going to come to some of these characters at some point. So
when they've piled it up, so basically there's probably going to be a lot in the third movie. Or there's
in terms of I want to highlight just a few other people from the cast, in terms just to keep things moving. I thought Michael Persbrandt as the shapeshifter, skin changer.
Oh yeah,
right.
I thought he did a great job. Then funny little note: Stephen Colbert and his family appeared as Lake Town citizens.
Lake Town.
And
was
we also
interesting.
got Peter Jackson in there.
Yeah,
He was
Peter
right.
Jackson.
He opened up the movie.
He opened up the movie. Yep.
And then someone else. I just can't remember at the moment.
Well, you had
might have been
the
Peter
editor
Jackson's.
of the movie.
There
He
we go.
appeared as a fishmonger. Producer Zane Weiner appears as a citizen as well. So they need a lot of citizens.
That's
They
Apparently,
did a lot of citizens.
they're like, you want to be in
mean-
this movie? Go, come in.
Well, they had like huge casting calls in New Zealand before the movies.
These
like
movies
where
keep
people
New Zealand
flocked
afloat.
to. Oh yes. Also, New Zealand kind of claims this movie as their movie. Like you
Yeah.
go into their like movie stores, and they have like it divided kind of by country. So it'll be like U.S. movies, and there's like a New Zealand section. Lord of the Rings is not in the U.S. section; it is in the New Zealand.
Yeah, and that's
I'd
fine.
buy
by
that.
me. Yeah, and I'm fine with that. Hey, you know, anything you can take pride in, and you know, because we've learned that New Zealand is such a beautiful locale. You know, I mean, James Cameron's working on the next Avatar movies. They're going to be shot in.
Well, they've rebuilt like
New
full
Zealand.
studios, like
Yeah.
state of the art things there. Most of them have homes out there, and why wouldn't you? It's wonderful.
Yeah, it looks like a different world on cinema. I've never been.
I
there,
I definitely want to talk about the world, but while we're also on this, in terms of actual extras and things like that, what I found interesting, you know, they do put out casting calls, but it sucks when you have to do pickups. And you know what I love, there's they're little blogs. I love them, and we'll talk about more about them. But there was one of them, I think it's like number 12 or 13, where they're doing pickups and they need a ton of extras, and they can't get anybody.
because they're all.
Yeah, to me, you know, what's one of the biggest,
I'll do it.
one of the most interesting parts of this movie is that, you know, obviously any movie's gonna have pickups, but the amount of pickups for these movies, like they rival the shooting schedule of, you know, we last week we did American Hustle. You know what I mean? American Hustle was done in 45 days.
45 days.
Pickups on this probably were like 60 at least.
Oh yeah, I mean, and the mere fact that they're filming back to back. I mean, they're filming it as all one movie, too, and that's an undertaking. I mean, it's huge, and you're right. Like as far, I can't even imagine. Like, what do you do? Like, how do you? Who's the person who arranges and organizes and says, okay, this is what we're doing. This is what we need. Like,
Well, you have to. I mean, partly, you know, it comes from the editing.
Yeah.
And you must be like, oh, I don't really want to ask for this, but we need it. Partly, I you know, it's probably Fran and Philippa, you know, in terms of story, perhaps. But certainly Peter.
yeah,
Wait,
absolutely.
wait. Yeah, that's the big one.
Yeah, Peter's definitely the big one.
One of the things that I liked visually about this film was in the beginning I really noticed how they were going from some very beautiful locations to very dark and dreary. You open up and you get the rain and you get all this, and
Right.
then all of a sudden you're prancing through this beautiful field like in the middle of springtime.
Sure.
And that was, to me, it was very apparent throughout the whole thing.
Mhm.
The different forests, the different areas, going back and forth, getting that light and dark. And I really visually enjoyed that. Because to me, this could have just been a very dark film between the forests and
Sure,
smogs and all
sure.
that. And I did like that they embraced the light moments and the beautiful scenery around them.
Yeah, no, I mean this one again. It did very similar to what Lord of the Rings was able to accomplish between the sets and whatnot. To your point regarding the editor, I mean, Jabez Olsen. I think I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his name correctly. You know, he used an Avid-based system, and it was pretty cool because what he said is, you know, he's like, yeah, it's a little bit different than your typical editing thing. Like he would literally sit beside him on set with the smaller portable Avid system while he's shooting. And, you know, then when they were shooting on the sound stages, this portable Avid system is networked into their storage. So he gets access to all the footage. And that way Peter has time on set between setups. He's able to work and figure out which performances and which takes he wants to do. They don't do all that much cutting on the set, he says, but they often do assemblies and editor's cuts on set, but usually we'll wait until a weekend or day off to shoot. So, I mean, I think with the digital technology today and being what it is and how you are as an editor, as a filmmaker, you are able to use this technology in fantastic ways. And so long as you have the budget to do it, but
And they're shooting on the reds, you
right.
know, so that's the
Yeah.
technology.
so it just makes the filmmaking process that much more efficient. Than could you imagine? I can't even imagine the Lord of the Rings trilogy being shot on, it was on film.
It was on film,
But could you imagine all to catalog that? And
they had
right? I mean, that's crazy. And you sort of kind of get the sense with these movies and our future of movies that they're able to build a concept, and they could do it. As you're trying to think from thought to
the speed of thought.
the speed of thought. They're actually able to do this stuff now at the speed of thought. Get better ideas. They do a lot of. They can do previs and stuff like that. So I find that stuff fascinating. What they're able to accomplish when you're filming so much.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the shooting process, one of the things that I love, and this, kind of came from Avatar too. I don't know if Peter Jackson and James Cameron, they're always kind of top of technology. But he had the one little camera that can walk. You basically walk on around.
Right.
Call it like a wrestling mat.
Yeah.
But and then the camera is the visual world of what you're walking around in, and I just find that so funny.
Yeah, I find it funny, but I find it great. And it's funny that you mentioned Cameron, because it was Cameron who did he was the one that did the initial push for the high frame rate system.
Mm-hmm.
He came out to CinemaCon. He talked about it, and then he is, I think Cameron is I don't think people realize the genius that this man is for not only cinema but technology, and for the
everything.
space program, for he is incredible, and he seems to be infectious because he can get other directors, he can talk about stuff and get other directors like Peter Jackson, because of James Cameron, all on board with the high frame rate system. You take somebody like Michael Bay, who never wanted to film a movie in 3D because he didn't enjoy the format. James Cameron can talk you off that ledge, and I think it's great that you have people like this. We're going to talk about high frame rate later and what we think of it, but what I'm saying is the technology is there for these directors to give us Smaug, to give us these commercial big things, and hey, it's a great cinematic experience.
Yeah. Sarah, as an actress, how does one even get into character of this? Again, it's just, to me, it seems I love this, and I love that we can do this, but I would never want to shoot a movie in this way, because to me, I just can't see the set. I can't picture it in that way.
I think that you have to have just a really vivid imagination and an ability to just accept what someone tells you quickly and let it emotionally affect you, or let it in. If someone tells you there's a dragon, you really have to make yourself believe that there's a dragon. And I think it's just an openness and a willingness of the actors to use their imagination and to try and cite all of their senses, even if they're not there. And just creation of remembering not only who you're the presence of, and even if you're not there, but the setting, and to remember that a dragon's blowing fire at you, and that it's hot, and that all this other stuff is going on. It's just.
It's amazing to me, perspective too. Again, you have with this, you have so much height difference, and because you have the humans, you have the hobbits, you have dwarves, and the elves, and where's your perspective go?
Right, and I don't want to take away from the actors. I agree with everything you said, and there's a lot, and I think a lot of it is the imagination, but I also do give credit to the director. Mm-hmm. I give credit to the director who has this vision in his head, and he's like, okay. Talking about perspective, a lot of them, we've seen them. Well, they use these blue tennis balls when they're filming the CG. So, okay, over here is this, over here is this. This is what this is going to look like. And when you get a charismatic director who has everything in his head, I think he's able to coach along in a sense. He respects the actor or actress enough with, you know, he'll allow them their leeway for the character, but when they're filming on green screen, somebody still has to fill in the blanks to spark that imagination. And I think when you get a Peter Jackson, a Steven Spielberg, or, you know, these people are able to
and they can illustrate everything so well.
Yeah.
Like, it's like when someone's painting a picture for you, if they're engaged and they're like painting with all these beautiful colors and stuff, like, you're going to be able to see it more.
Yeah, and if there's a previs on it as well, that could sort of show what the scene may look like, or, you know, a lot of these people, the way they storyboard out, you know, that's why, like, I couldn't direct because I'm not an artist, and that's like, I couldn't do storyboards. They'd all look like stick figures, and it would suck. I couldn't do that. So I give a lot of directors you see, they're good artists. They can map things out and they can draw things so that people can understand what they look like. And I think as an actor, when you're working on a big budget thing, you have to have good leadership. There's got to be a good charisma, and they have to be well versed with what they're filming to relay that to the actor, so that they help the actor give the best performance. You don't want the performances to get lost, and I think that's why I like Toriel. Evangeline Lilly does not get lost in any of the special effects, and you know, and I think that's.
And you know, in terms of being a good leader, what I love about him is that he's got, you know, through all the movies he's made, he's got a really good team. For example, you know, in terms of, we talked about previs, right? So the guy who did the pre-visualization on this movie, eventually, you know, who's actually worked with Peter since Brain Dead, he eventually had to do a second unit. And because he'd done the pre-visualization, it was like, okay, well, you know what I want, so go. And he did it. It's
funny. Can we, you know, I've always known Brain Dead as Dead Alive. I kick ass for the Lord. You know, and that, I was here in LA. I was visiting when that movie came out and saw it up at the Sunset 5. You know, it had such a great time. And then it actually was a Lionsgate title for home video. And so very, very happy. But yeah, no, I mean, to me, I always remember it as Dead Alive more than Brain Dead. I was confused.
If you haven't seen it, great movie.
It's a great fun movie. Now that zombies are
back,
you know,
in
the flavor of the month, it's a great movie to go check out. But yeah, you're right. He has a great crew around him, and that's what I find too. It's like when you have Guillermo del Toro, it just goes back to that. Like, he would have brought in his own crew, and, you know, we would have had it would have been a different feel. And I just wonder, would it have been like one of those shock to the systems, like, because we're so used to the Lord of the Rings, or would it would have been his style? Would we have, you know, these are all questions we'll never know, but I just find it so fascinating. I almost wish that he was able to get his vision out, because he would have worked with a different crew, but yet he's equally as energetic as a director, and he's a fanboy as Peter Jackson.
But
I guess I'm such a marathon person that I want to be able to watch these all consecutively, so I want them all to work.
Hopefully the extended edition.
God, that'll be
4 days worth of your time.
At least, yeah.
I've done the Lord of the Rings trilogy multiple times.
In
extended?
1 day?
Yeah.
The extended versions?
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah.
You got a lot of time in your hands.
And you say you're not a fan.
I did not say
You didn't say you're not a super fan.
Yeah.
You know, going back to kind of, we spoke about this, you know, Sarah, you made the point of New Zealand takes pride in this. I mean, you know, if there's any movie that they want to be known for and things like that, like, what I love is this comes more from seeing the Lord of the Rings behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. You know, every time, they're never ahead of schedule. They're always on deadline, and then it's always like, oh, the premiere's in tomorrow. And what I love is, you know, it's definitely a leadership thing, but I love how everyone takes pride in this movie, and they're willing to go that extra length and
Absolutely.
be like, okay, I'm going to not sleep for 3 weeks.
Yep.
And they'll do it. They'll not sleep for 3 weeks.
Yeah, I remember for the Lord of the Rings trilogies, you know, there were times where, as they say, prints were arriving wet, meaning they had literally just gotten out of the lab, you know, smacked onto the reels, put into the cans, and then brought to the theaters, you know. And yeah, they work really fast and hard, and you're right. But everybody takes pride, I think. But
Oh,
it shows. Look, it's one of the things I loved about Lord of the Rings. That collaborative effort showed, and it was fantastic. And they delivered a new world cinematically. There was a reason why each one of the Lord of the Rings movies was nominated for Best Picture each year that one of those movies came out. And it's because it was something fresh. And you could tell that the work put into it, that there was a lot of work, a lot of choreography, a lot of direction, and so many things are going on. And the special effects and how they meld that together. And even with this movie,
Let's talk, we talked about the scene, but in terms of the treasure, they filmed so much reference material to be able to actually get the CGI. I mean, anytime you talk about fire or anything moving, oh my God, to individually piece computer-generated graphics of small little coins. Like, okay, just imagine this room and how many coins we'd have to fill it with just to fill it up with. Like, that's
just
insane.
to make it jangle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Such an effort. Too much effort.
It is, but and again, as a movie fan, I mean, I think too, the past couple of movies that we've talked about have been more of our smaller prestige films. We had one movie that was in black and white. We had another movie that used no artificial lighting whatsoever. And the stark difference between Desolation of Smaug and, say, Dallas Buyers Club, even American Hustle and Nebraska, I mean, there's a stark difference. And, it sort of kind of hit me while I was watching Desolation of Smaug, and I saw it in IMAX 3D. And again, it was like, wow, it looked fantastic too. And I have to say that they did a great job with the 3D on this movie.
I saw it in 3D as well.
Yeah, and
I enjoyed it.
It looked good.
I don't like it when 3D is too in your face, and this was the most standout 3D. Like where I was a little taken back was the bees.
Yeah, the bees.
The bees, just the bees. I was like, oh.
He loves his bugs, though. Remember, even in the
bugs.
first one, they were always with the things.
Yeah, but 3D was done very well.
It was done well, and I think that's one of the things too, as far as the cinematic experience. I think that 3D and the use of digital has just come leaps and bounds within the past 5 years. So, but this movie, it looked great in IMAX, and
Let's have you guys seen the high frame rate?
I have not.
I've seen the first one. I've seen the second one in this.
I'll go by Europe because I saw it. I saw it in the first one, and I vowed never again until James Cameron comes out with his Avatar. I'll give him the pass. But after seeing the first Hobbit, number one, I didn't like that movie that much, and the high frame rate for me made me dislike it even more.
It's true. I'm on the same boat. The second one, at first, when they're at the end of the Prancing Pony, I was like, okay, whoa. But in
Stop
time,
the clock.
Yeah, in time, you know what? I didn't notice it as much, and it seemed to flow really well. I mean, the first time I ever saw it, it seemed like everything was sped up 1.5. And ironically enough, I remember looking at the running time of just even the 3D movie and the 2D movies versus the high frame rate, and the high frame rates was like 4 minutes shorter. So
Interesting.
I found that really interesting. I was like, so is it really sped up?
Well,
how does that work?
Here's the interesting thing too about the high frame rate. It got there a little bit thumbnail sketch about some of the history of high frame rate. James Cameron came to a CinemaCon, as I mentioned before, and he introduced high frame rate and he said what it was going to be about. Then Peter Jackson came to CinemaCon about a year or so later, and he brought footage of The Hobbit with him. Bad mistake at that point because it was a majority of the people just did not like it. They didn't get it. They didn't like it. They, in fact, it forced Peter Jackson to go back. They had to do some recoloring. And the line was, well, we're going to make it look more like film. Well, I was like, well, what the hell did you spend all this time for if you're going to, like, what's the point? Why not just make it look like film from the beginning? And then when The Hobbit came out, there was a big push for the high frame rate. Warner Brothers was really pushing theaters to get prepped for it, to get it out there. And it was not liked by a majority of the people. And this time, if you notice the release on Desolation of Smaug, it was sort of kind of kept quiet. They weren't pushing it as much in the marketing, yet they released it in, I think, like double the amount of theaters that they did for the first Hobbit. They doubled the amount of high frame rate theaters, but yet nobody, I didn't even know until I had to read about it. So it wasn't like it was pushed. So Peter Jackson is still a staunch supporter of it. Warner Brothers obviously is a staunch supporter of it. Perhaps it'll get better. You said this version was better than the first Hobbit,
and I don't know what about it made it better. But yeah, it didn't. People didn't seem to mind it.
Well, and to Peter Jackson's point, he said he spent a lot of time in the color grading room, really putting my head into how we make 48 frames per second not have a video feel, because that was the biggest that was the biggest criticism, is that it looked like a soap opera, or it looked too real. And he's still working on how to improve it. And it's fun. Yeah, here we go. Moviegoers will get to choose. They can see Desolation of Smaug in 24 or 48, as well as in 3D. Warner Brothers increased the numbers of theaters showing the film high frame rate. 750 theaters, up from 450 in the first Hobbit movie. Internationally, it will play in 2,500 theaters, and that's an increase of more than 800 screens. So that's, Peter Jackson is doing it. The high frame rate is in 3D.
Yes.
And how is the 3D?
I totally might have seen high frame rate, and I have no idea.
Well, then you didn't mind it.
So I didn't mind it. I have no idea if I did.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the first one in 3D and high frame rate, and I go to the plate scene in that one.
Yeah.
It got me so disoriented. So many things were happening that it almost was like a nauseous experience. And then this one, it slowed down for whatever reason, and it seemed to work.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because from his, when I was looking up notes, one of the things that I was curious about is, okay, so we have Peter Jackson, but somebody that high frame rate's going to really affect is your cinematographer.
Yeah.
And Andrew Lesnie, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. To him, he was like, it was interesting. He was like saying it's just another addition to the cinematographer's palette. He said it reduces motion blur and strobing in some situations, and I didn't get that. I mean, all I had was motion blur when I was watching the first Hobbit, especially in the action scenes. It was tough for my eyes to adjust. But he's always like, he always stages a scene with priority to storytelling and always looking for ways to illuminate. And he also went on to say the point of shooting The Hobbit in 48 frames per second is presenting the 3D experience and making it more enjoyable. So, listen, there are a lot of factors when you are exhibiting a movie in 3D. Number one, first and foremost, is the light throw. It's brighter. You need a brighter bulb. It needs to be on its highest settings, because as soon as you're putting on those glasses, you're dimming the screen. And for 3D to really work, it's got to be brighter. A lot of theaters, some theaters, they don't, I'm not naming anyone's, but it's a common practice that some of them won't amp up the light bulb because they'll burn out quicker. So it's an expense. That's why James Cameron, Michael Bay, and Peter Jackson are going out. Come on, theaters. You need to do this. And they have. So I don't know. The high frame rate, I haven't heard the backlash this time around. Has anybody read anything? I haven't heard the backlash like I did in the first Hobbit.
I have not.
So maybe people are becoming accustomed to it.
What I like, in terms of that, what I love is that I think techniques like this should be reserved for movies like this. Like,
True.
You know what I mean? And what I dislike is movies, let's say Dallas Buyers Club. If Dallas Buyers Club was in high frame rate in 3D, oh my goodness, why?
Yeah.
But this isn't, as you said, it's an experience. People want to go and see it, and in that respect, then they want to see the full spectacle. And so for and the fact that no one is complaining, they're perfect, and I didn't notice it that much.
Yeah.
I think they're perfecting it.
Yeah, and I agree. And you said something really key. It is about the movie-going experience. And there's so much of a push these days now for VOD and things, and I've talked about this before, that anything that pushes the movie-going experience to make it better for the audience. And you're right, Nebraska doesn't have to be high frame rate.
It could have been in color.
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah, you know.
I liked it in black and white.
Yeah, no, but I'm just like, you be selective on the right movie. It's fine. And make it a movie-going experience. Give the audiences something that you're never going to get on a tablet, that you're never going to get on your iPhone, and even on your mega flat panel television screen. You know, you want audiences, you don't want them to get pissed off. And that's what happened when there were 3D conversions from like Clash of the Titans. You pissed people off, and it turned them against 3D. And that's why 3D has had a really uphill battle, and we've sort of kind of plateaued. People have come to expect 3D somewhat, but now it looks good. And Avatar was the game changer for that. So maybe, you know, you might have convinced me. Maybe I'll go try to check it out in high frame rate. I mean,
It's not as bad.
why not?
The opening scene you'll be a little
Odd.
freaked out about, but after that you're good.
I mean, I'll add a little bit to your point. It's just like there are certain movies now, like with Avatar and with like The Hobbit and Desolation of Smaug. I feel like I almost need to kind of see them on a bigger screen because I know that when I get them home, it's not going to really do it justice. So those are the exceptions to the rule for 3D for me, because I'm one of those people who, if something's in 3D and not in 3D, unless it's a huge picture like this, I am not seeing it in 3D. It's just, to me, a waste of time and a waste of money. But for things like this that I know it's not going to be able to be captured at home, and this is my only opportunity to see it,
Right.
and it's full, like, then I want to make the effort.
Yeah, but a lot of people are think the same way you do. I never really hated 3D. I understood the reason behind it. I just hated the fact that that every other movie was coming out in 3D. And finally, I think we're coming to a point where they're being more selective. So I will see a movie in 3D. Like I saw Iron Man 3 in 3D, looked great. Star Trek Into Darkness 3D IMAX looked phenomenal. You know, but again, we don't need Nebraska. I didn't need The Way Back in 3D. You know, there were other movies that came. I didn't need The Heat in 3D.
Yeah, no.
So, and I'll take it further. I have a 3D TV at home, along with a 3D Blu-ray player in my receiver, and I'll buy the 3D Blu-ray of the movie that I enjoyed watching. I enjoy it only because it just adds another level. I'm not one who's affected by 3D. A lot of people get headaches from it, or they get nauseous. Mm-hmm. I enjoy any experience that will help get audiences in. I don't care if it's a gimmick, you know, smell-o-rama, sense around. I went to the mall. And anything that can excite a little boy to go, oh, I gotta see this movie this way.
More dwarf farts.
More dwarf farts.
No.
Someone floated an air biscuit, but yeah, no, I'm totally on board. So you know, with Phil's recommendation, when I go home to Boston, I may check it out in high frame rate.
All right. Well, good. One of the things that I want to talk about this movie specifically, which I find very interesting, is the video blogs and the marketing kind of behind this, because I find it interesting because obviously there's the books out there. People are such huge fans, you know, even before, you know, typically sometimes you'll have people buy the book once they know it's going to become movies. They get well-versed again, and that increases sales. But I think in terms of this, you know, typically you have the behind the scenes come out after. And what I like about this, it gets so many people excited because like, oh, that's what that's going to look like. It's a little window into what the movie could be, and then it just gets people excited. And I think it's just a great marketing ploy, and then eventually you just put it on the DVD and your work is already done.
Yeah. Now, I'll be straight up. I never watch video blogs. I don't like to have that much information. I don't want anything potentially spoiled for me. You know, I know that they take great care. I'll watch the trailers. If they release like a scene from a movie, you know, as a marketing thing, I might watch the scene. But after a while, you know, for me, once I get to that certain point of saturation, I stop watching. Video blogs to me, I don't want to know. I'll see it when the DVD comes out or the Blu-ray comes out. I'll watch that. But you're right. I think from a marketing standpoint, there are a lot of other people who we've become such a society, such like we just want to have the information now. Yep. And now, and people want to be like have the king of spoiler information. I think that hurts the business somewhat, but it gets a lot. I think they started it with the first Lord of the Rings trilogy. They were doing video blogging.
But they didn't release them, did they?
I thought they did. I thought that was one of the, like Peter Jackson did a lot of that video blogging, and it's been sort of kind of in our marketing world now since I think Lord of the Rings had some video blogging going on.
I know it became like a heavy thing for the first Hobbit. I know that much.
So,
what's your thoughts?
I mean, I'm kind of in Demetri's like side. I don't want to know too much about the movie before I see it. After I see it, I want to know a lot. Right. So I'm glad that it's out there. But I understand it, and I think that there's a lot of people who do want it, especially when you get these huge movies and then you leave them on a cliffhanger and then you tell people to wait a year and a half. And you're like, wait. This is supposed to be, first of all, I thought this was going to be 1. Then I thought it was going to be 2. And now you've got me 3 movies and you've got me 3 hours. Like, I understand the demand for it. And I think
it works for a movie like this. Again, people already know the story. Sure. Now they're just guessing how it's going to change or how it's going to translate. And what I found interesting, they did not go to Comic-Con.
No.
Yeah.
Consciously. Because, they didn't have stuff ready. But,
right.
It's interesting. You have these video blogs, so at least you're satisfying the hunger. Because,
sure.
Most places... we got to announce this at Comic-Con. We got to announce this, we're going to go. But they didn't have actors who could go. Peter was shooting, and so he couldn't go. He couldn't edit anything for the thing. And so he made a public apology on the blog. Hey, we're not going to Comic-Con.
Yeah, and listen, again, from a marketing standpoint, I get it. And for the people who watch it, that's fantastic. Like I said, I just try to stay away from anything that gives any more added information outside of, I don't mind watching a 1.5-minute scene, that's put in somewhere. The video blogging, I like to watch, to your point, after I get excited about the movie.
Well, that's what the great part about it is that it is on demand.
Yep.
It's not like, hey, tonight on ABC, we got a 40-minute special on the Hobbit making of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it's a great marketing, and then think about it from an internet space, like, whether it be Yahoo or Coming Soon or something, if they could score like an exclusive with, hey, we have video blog number 2 here, and then that just gets linked up to everywhere. And I don't know if they get a fantastic amount of hits with a movie like this. I don't think it would work so much, and no offense to Alexander Payne, like on a Nebraska.
No, certainly not. But again, because nobody knows Nebraska, you know what I mean? For that, it has to be specifically once people have information. This, they have so much information, so much research that it's simple. Demetri, let's talk about the premiere. You and I had a chance to watch it.
Yeah.
And, and one of the reasons why we didn't have a chance to watch it, we streamed it on our website, but it was because they allowed a link of the whole thing. And Amy Paffrath, who's actually a friend of Anatomy of Movies, she did the red carpet along with, I forget the guy.
I don't know who the guy was, but it was a fantastic format. It was awesome.
Yeah.
I was proud that you got that and that we had it. I was watching it at a bar at the garage on my iPad going, look guys, this is on the Anatomy of a Movie website. I loved their format. I loved how they had the actors go to the guy and he got some good stuff. And I loved how the woman, what's her name again? I'm sorry?
Amy Paffrath.
Amy, I loved how she was with the crowd. And I was having fun. I usually don't watch this stuff.
But is there this stuff usually available? I mean, we're not talking Oscars. We're, you know what I mean? Like, this is...
It can be. When Deathly Hallows Part 2 came out, they did the premiere in London.
Which is also a Warner Brothers movie.
Yep, and that was huge. Like, that was streamed live. And I was watching that, too, because...
So is it just Warner Brothers who's doing this type of thing that's allowing people access to the premieres that obviously may not be there or cannot get there?
I don't recall when I was at Lionsgate that we that we did live from the red carpet. They may have done it with Hunger Games. You would know, perhaps, but
I don't remember.
I don't
anything.
recall.
I don't remember anything being live. I remember just your typical like they'll send someone from E and they'll send someone to go out there and kind of do slight interviews, but not to the same, I guess.
I mean, they, for this movie, they covered from beginning to start a movie. And it was, again, I think as a fan, see, that to me is great. Because everybody's if you've been at a premiere, everybody's in a happy mood about this movie coming out. They obviously had the goods. I think it's a smart thing to do. I was just proud because it was on Anatomy of a Movie, and I had my friends there, and we're watching on and that's where the iPad works fantastic. I had it, we're drinking beers, and it was right there. We were able to hear it pretty good, and even somebody texted me and said, do this, because I sent this link out to a bunch of people, and somebody texted me and said, this is pretty cool. I'm like, it is really cool, and I think for a fan, I enjoyed watching the Harry Potter one as well, but I liked this one. I like Lord of the Rings because they at least went to the audience and they were able to pick people out of the audience and say, "Hey, we have Orlando Bloom. You want to ask him a question?" And I thought that was a great dynamic. It was something different. And for people who don't get to go to a premiere, it's a great little inside red carpet look. And I think whoever put that together did a fantastic job. And it would be cool. I would love to see that with a Star Trek thing, or actually I'd love to be at the premiere for a Star Trek thing, but I think for fans, for fanboys and fangirls, that was a good get. Good job, Phil. That was a really great get. That really was. What did you think about it? You watched it too?
I was caught up in the experience of it, so I forget actual sound bites of all the people, and I remember when Peter Jackson, we got the man himself.
Yeah.
So I thought, and I love that sort of access.
Yeah.
For everybody.
Let's do it again.
Well, I think it seems to me that Warner Brothers is doing this, so I give them a lot of credit. Hopefully other studios too, but
I have to say, and I think I said this in another podcast, I think from a marketing perspective this year, Warner Brothers has done just an amazing job. Look at what they turned Gravity into. Look at what they turned Man of Steel into. Prior to the release,
great ad campaigns.
It really,
they're
was.
doing very well on that.
And but nobody knew how Gravity was. If people were going to gravitate towards Gravity, Man of Steel, prior to its release, there were very low expectations box office wise, and it wasn't. I mean, that marketing campaign kicked in and got everybody excited to do it. They had The Conjuring. The Conjuring, a rated R horror movie being released in the middle of summer, not the most, that doesn't happen too often. And they were able to turn that movie, huge opening, over $100 million, and it was because of marketing. And, this year, Warner Brothers has spared no expense. And I think with The Hobbit, too, they had an uphill battle because the first movie just wasn't received all that great. And they were able to, number one, Peter Jackson delivered the goods, and they were able to market it to say, this is a much better movie. I mean, all the reviews, anybody that you talked to, anybody that they had sound bites from said, oh, this movie's way better. And it's doing very strong. It's staying strong box office-wise. So, where it may not rival The Hobbit, I think that they'll bring the people who are pissed off at the first one back, and they might even get some more. I mean, to date, this movie's made over $86 million thus far. $217 million when you're doing foreign and domestic. So, they have a hit in their hands. And I think part of it is their marketing.
I agree. Let's talk about the legacy of this movie. And we'll obviously talk about the third. Which, by the way, the only, for me, in terms of, editing and story and things like that, I felt I didn't know how they were going to end it because I'd never read the books. So I didn't know a natural breaking point, but I knew something bad was going to happen, or I had a sense of what was going to happen. And for the ending that we got, I felt like we could have ended 20 minutes earlier. That's just how I feel. Partly because, at that point we have so much going on, and the intercutting itself, Gandalf, he's trapped somewhere with Radagast. We have the people back in Lake Town.
Not with Radagast. He's just in He's in a cage.
Oh, that's true.
He's in a cage.
Well, God knows where the Radagast is. That.
Well, Radagast or Galadriel is going to come help.
So.
Or a big eagle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scapegoat.
Whenever in peril, throw in a big eagle.
That couldn't take us all the way to the destination.
Right. It just drops us off. I'm tired.
Oh
This
my
is as
goodness.
far as we're going. Okay, we're good. Great.
Well, I mean, one of the with that ending, I'm excited to see the third one, and see how they do it. I mean, I don't know what the running time of the third movie will be. It's gonna be 4 hours, 10 hours.
Good God. Well, I can tell you where they were originally. When it was 2 movies, the original cut was supposed to be when Bard appears on the riverbank as a silhouetted figure. Mm-hmm. You weren't supposed to exactly know who he was, and this was from when Guillermo was involved. Mm-hmm. I think where they cut this, it had that sense of it was
something bad's coming.
Yeah, and it actually sort of kind of mirrored the 2 towers because our characters were left in peril.
Well, the first one was good,
right?
This one was bad, and then obviously by the end of the last movie, we'll end on a happy note.
Yeah, and you're gonna have to. I liked how this one ended. It made me want to see, the third one. Again, I'm just gonna. I go, when you talk about legacy, I'm not sure how this one will be remembered, depending on how it finishes out. I think. I mean, Lord of the Rings to people, that was the pinnacle of bringing this trilogy onto the screen and seeing how it is, and come to fruition on the big screen. This one, because they sort of kind of stumbled on that first hurdle, I think that sort of might have hurt them. This one's going to bring people back, but they're going to have to finish strong.
To me, what I'm taking away from this movie, or this segment of this trilogy, to me, this was a lot about character. I'm going to take away that this is where we got introduced kind of like the heart of the characters of this story, besides Bilbo, which we got in the first, and Gandalf, who we already know. But on top of that, I think I'm really taking away in like the characters and the barrel scene and Smaug. Okay, good.
Yeah.
And the next one's kind of like the redemption, the adventure, everyone getting in the right place again, beating the dark. I don't know.
Yeah, there's going to be some big wars coming up and battles. Again, though, I will say, I'll use as an example, each of the Lord of the Rings movies were nominated for Best Picture. I don't see Desolation of Smaug. I see it missing. I don't see it being nominated. And, maybe it's because, it's, The Hobbit there and back again and again and again. It would be nice to see Peter Jackson go on to another world or try to do something else. I mean, a lot of this has a similar feel to the Lord of the Rings for me, and that's one of the things where I can't put it up on that pedestal like I do the Lord of the Rings trilogy. This is a good action movie. It's a good commercial holiday movie to go see.
It certainly is. And on that note, I think that certainly there's as we've joked, there's about 40 years we could spend on this.
We didn't talk about Howard Shore's music.
We talked about music. We didn't talk about the Elf King of the Woodlands.
Who's he? See?
The good news is we have another movie coming out soon. And we might do like a special Hobbit trilogy recap as well.
That's a solid idea once they're all done.
Yeah, I think that'll be fun, and because again with the score, I want to compare it as a trilogy, and how it held throughout. This is one of the songs we're listening to now.
Music as usual, great.
Howard Shore did
Howard
it.
Shore.
And he did
He did the Lord of the Rings. Yeah,
everything.
absolutely.
I was like checking in that follow through. It's great soundtrack always.
Yeah, and then of course you have the Ballad of Bilbo Baggins thrown in there. So
I'm not so sure about that one.
Oh, you don't know.
I don't know. No.
If there's anything that obviously you guys want to talk about as fans, and you want to get our opinion, please just comment below. We'll certainly keep the conversation going. This is a perfect movie for exactly just that. So please take advantage. In the meantime, where can they follow you, Demetri?
They can follow me at Anatomy of a Movie on the website, on YouTube, on iTunes. This is
what happens when you don't have hosts with Twitters. And follow Sarah at the same exact place. Coming to a movie near you. And of course, follow us on Anatomy, Movie Anatomy on Twitter, Facebook.com/Anatomy of a Movie, and YouTube.com/Anatomy of a Movie. And of course, all the things in one place, Anatomy of a Movie. And we might do some special red carpet premieres from there as well. And 2014 promises to be a great year with a lot of fun stuff headed your way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to ask regarding, like, how do people comment? Because I go onto the sites regularly. We get a lot of hits. We get a lot of good, solid viewings.
We'll do a video just for commenting.
Yeah, are people not? You gotta comment, please. I mean, it costs you nothing.
It's the YouTube thing. It's been a whole switch. Anyway, we'll do a video separate to that.
Fair enough.
See you for the next movie.
See you later.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.
Thanks for watching Anatomy of a Movie on YouTube. For more on your favorite movies, subscribe to our channel here, and be sure to let us know what you think in our comment section below here. Bye.